You.
Hey, welcome to our next or second episode of Tie-Dye Talks. Today I have with me Andy Salandi, and we have another special guest, Tiffany Romaine. Look at this. It's supposed to be me and Andy, but yet we're expanding already. So we've gotten some really good feedback from the first episode, and we haven't even really put out to you guys yet. This was our inner circle, but we're back again with some new chats and new talks on what we're going to be discussing today. Andy, what are we talking about?
Well, true to our nature, we say every time we show up, we're just going to make up the topic on the fly. So today, Paul, Tiffany, our topic is technology. I've had a lot of conversations with people in the past about technology, and is it helping or is it hurting our lives? So we want to have this discussion today about technology, and there's pros and cons to everything in life, and which one outweighs each other. We're going to discuss it. I know we got different skill sets here in our group, and we probably have different perspective. So before we get any further, we want to bring Tiffany in as a new member of the team. And I'm going to start off by throwing something to Tiffany so she can set the stage for what we mean by technology. Technology is such a broad definition, honestly. Tiffany, if we're talking technologies that helping or hurting our lives, what would you define that technology as? What comes to mind for you?
I would say anything with a screen, to be honest. Anything that has to do with the screen, whether it be a television, because those have advanced quite a bit, versus a computer or a tablet or even a cell phone. So lots of those things have had advancements throughout time. So I think that for me would consider technology, and then what is included and available through that technology or through that, way of using it.
Great, great, great. So now, Paul, I want to say earlier, when I referred to us as we're in the same age bracket, Paul. So we grew up we went to school without cell phones. We went to school without computers. We went to school without some of these technologies that Tiffany just mentioned. What is your definition, Paul, of technology? And what are your thoughts? Open this conversation on first of all the definition, and then identification of the tech that we'll talk about, so that we can then frame this conversation around those to see, is it helping or is it hurting our lives?
Yeah, it's a great question, and actually, I think a really interesting topic. Just specifically given what's going on in the world. Currently, in some of the lecturing and teaching I'm doing, one of the things that I often like to at least say that I'm up on is being current, trying to be current in the latest trends and understanding what's happening in the world. And I think right now, technology is at a point in time whereby it's sweeping the world in terms of the conversation and what's happening due to artificial intelligence. So right now, technology is the big discussion. We've gone through different technological waves, let's say, per se. But I'm old like you, Andy. I often tell the story that I got first involved in technology using a 1200 baud modem dialing. We didn't even have internet in Canada. You had to dial up through a tunnel connection via your modem. The one that goes, and you gotta wait for like 30 seconds to go get a drink and come back.
Don't remind me of that song. I still have brain damage from waiting to get online. So go ahead.
So these are for all the old heads we're talking to. These young cats won't know what we're talking about, right? Only thing they know is ting, ting, tickling, ting, ting, tickling, ting, ting. That's what they know, right?
Yeah, dial-up and AOL.
That's what I'm talking about. So I had to do
Tiffany
dial-up,
said that
AOL.
dial-up and AOL. She was a baby, I guess. How you know what dial-up and AOL?
There you go. That's what I'm talking about.
I grew up right on the cusp of when the internet really got introduced. I'm before Google, so
there you go.
I'm proud of that.
Yeah, so I used to dial into Buffalo because they didn't even have it in Canada, right? I'm here, up in the Great White North. So I had to join all these different communities on AOL. So I've always been a big fan of community. I think that's one aspect that's kind of positive with technology. It allows us to cut space and time and be able to connect to friends, loved ones, meeting new people, etc. So, there's tons of positives which we're just tapping on right now, but there's also the negatives. And the negatives in a big nutshell is people being removed from that same thing they're clamoring for, that idea of connectedness, right? People get isolated. People get attached, people get addicted, people get taken away from their everyday lives, and they get away from their individuality, their spirituality, their connectedness with just other people, their humanness, let's say, right? So there's some positives and negatives, some big buckets I throw out there, but technology definitely is a tool that we are to use to aid us in our everyday lives, whatever that may be, right? What are your thoughts, Andy?
Yeah. So as a biologist, everything comes back to me tied to the scientific method. And I think there's a formal definition about machinery and equipment that has been created using the scientific method. You can say different areas like the engineering and the computer fields are the ones that's driving these technological advancement, these tools. Tiffany kind of mentioned anything that have a screen. And I think that's a good framework for our discussion, because again, technology has been around. Once man created some, machinery to use to leverage and make life easy, it's technology. But I think what we're talking about in this episode is, number one, the new technologies, and number two, how rapidly it's being implemented and the impact it's having on us. That's kind of where I want to go with this, right? It's happening so fast. It took a long time to go from the home phone. First of all, folks didn't even have a home phone when I was growing up in Trinidad, right? You had a call where, the priest had the one phone in the community. So if some of your family members called from overseas, you had to go down the street. You get a messenger that comes up the street and said, hey, you have a phone call, so everybody's going to go back down, mom and everyone waiting for, let's say, our aunt to call again, because there's just one phone in the community. Then it went to the installation of home phones. Just before I left Trinidad, we were all starting to get home phones, and that was a big thing. You go back now, and everyone have 2 cell phones in the island that I came from. Not one, but 2, right? And it's gone from there. But I think, guys, bringing it back to you and back to Paul, Tiffany, the things that you talked about, everything that have a screen, right? So let's use the one that I think is having the most impact, the mobile phone. Let's talk about, is that thing helping or hurting us? Your views on the cell phone. We know we can't do without it. I can say whatever. If I leave home, I'm turning back as well. We all connected to this device, but we all use it to different levels. So for you, this technology called a cell phone, whether it's an Android, iPhone, you name it, your thoughts on, is it helping, hurting? Is it equal? What are your thoughts there?
My thoughts are that, one, I believe that everything is about balance. So I think that, like I said, when I was growing up, I had a flip phone. So the coolest thing on that was that when someone would call, it would light up different colors. And that was still a modality of technology because I could download like little games. However, as like the iPhone got introduced and things started to become more accessible, you could see the dangers of internet safety really coming to life. We really started out with chat rooms that you had to use on a physical computer. They didn't really have that on the cell phone as of yet. I also taught in the school system for 4 years. I taught middle school and I taught high school. So I've seen how those communities can be dangerous, and that sense of belonging can be dangerous. I believe it's about what you want to use it for. If you want to use it to help you to write, per se, an essay, because now they have things like AI to do that. I didn't have that growing up. I had to use a good old-fashioned book. However, I believe that now people are using certain things like AI, like ChatGPT and those types of things to help them further along. I think it's kind of about how you view it, honestly, in that sense.
I think, Tiffany, based on that answer, you can run to office in the future, because you're not going to have anybody mad at you because you stay in balance. I'm going to throw it to Paul. Let's see if we can get some controversy here. Paul, which side are you on? You can't be in the middle. In our talk, you can't be in the middle. You can't be equal, Paul. There's no such thing. Paul, your thoughts on what Tiffany just said. And is it helping the cell phone, Paul? Is it helping, hurting? How do you weigh it? What do you feel?
This is where I side with Tiffany, and I take my old self and I try to be young. It's like anything else they say, not to get too controversial, but if we look at anything, whether it's drugs, whether it's guns, whether it's technology, it's how people use it, right? And oftentimes, unfortunately, things that aid our life, we get lazy. And, too many times we're seeing that people are being left to be raised by this technology rather than still being raised by their parents, because we live in such a busy and fast, time of life right now. If you look and you understand technology life cycle too as well, where technology comes in, it's innovative, and then it starts to grow, then you hit a maturity stage and then a decline stage. That took a long time. It was still the same cycle, but if you understand the law of doubling, or even a 10-year cycle, if you look at again also Moore's law as well, whereby you have this whole idea of technology and computers that this integrated circuitry is going to double every couple of years, right? So that's what we're seeing, this advanced takeoff. But in terms of just regular being a futurist, understanding exponential growth, there's this whole idea that things double. So if we look at a simple doubling pattern, and you go 1, 2, 4, 16, right? 32, 64, right? 64, 128, 256, 512. 1024. We all know those numbers and see it in computers. We go from megabytes to terabytes to petabytes, et cetera, right? But if you understand in that 10-year period, your biggest gains are in your last 2 years. You're going to go from 1 to 2. You're not going to see that. That's still a full year. You're going to go from 1 to maybe 16. That's 4 years. You're not going to see it. You're going to go from 1 to 32. You're going to start seeing things now in that same 1 year. But all the while, it's still building behind the scenes. So right now, AI, artificial intelligence, it's new on the scene, but it's been here for almost 8 to 10 years already. That's the point. Now we're in the end cycle of that particular time, whereby we're looking at this whole idea of what technology stage of growth it's in, and we're just coming into the growth and maturity stage for AI. But if you look at that doubling factor, like I mentioned before, your biggest growth is going to happen from your year 8, 9, and 10. People are going to say, whoa, because 8, 9, and 10, you're going to go from 200 to 500 to 1,000. Right? So in anything, that jump that's that quick in a period of 1 year to 2 years only is going to have people really shocked and amazed, those who aren't paying attention. So we're seeing this technology moving so fast, but is it really? And I think the challenge there is our adoption rate. Like, there's always going to be early adopters. It's going to be those who are late adopters. Like they say, it's back to the old 80-20 rule, right? I go further. It's the 1, 5, 10, 20, 80, I call it. So there's the 1%ers, the 5%ers, the 10%ers, then your 20%ers, and then everybody else. Those things also allow you to tap into markets and understand marketing and understand people who you're talking to. So for us being in Tide, I think we're 1%ers, right? And we know 1%er people are the ones who get stuff done. But going back to answering your question, I think it's both. It does help and it does hurt. It helps in the sense that any technology from the earliest stages allows us to do more things, or do things different, or do things easier. Every time a new technological advance comes along, people talk about how that particular area is going to die, and they try to stop it. It was the same thing with computers and painting and graphic arts. Then it was the same thing with Photoshop, and then now it's the same thing, with digital photography. And then now it's the same thing with AI. I mean, it ever killed those industries in a sense. Those industries have naturally died off because there's an easier and better way to do it. So those who've been able to manifest the skill sets of using the technology to their aid and their benefit are the ones who come out beneficial. The problem we have right now is too many people are letting the technology just kind of run their whole life, rather than using the technology to better their life.
Yeah,
That's
but
kind of
Paul, so this is my thing. You and Tiffany, here's my point. I am saying it's both, yes, but the question is, and maybe it's the liberal in me, the pros versus the cons. We know it's both. Like I've heard it. You can take a gun and you can defend yourself. You can take a gun and you can murder somebody. You can take a knife and you can peel something. You can take a knife and stab somebody. No problem. But when you look at, okay, I'm gonna go back to when the social media started evolving as a new technology. The first one, before Facebook, there was others like MySpace and so forth. But let's say Facebook came in and really got massive global penetration. Everybody's on Facebook, right? And I remember I used to have my students do a presentation, and one of my favorite topic was Facebook helping or hurting our lives. Point blank. Not that it didn't have value, but was it helping or hurting our life? And of course, the students that volunteered to do that topic were Facebook aficionados. They were in love with their Facebook, but they only knew one side because it was a new adoption, a new tool, a new technology. I said, in science, you got to do non-biased research as much as you can. You don't want to blog on someone's opinion. You want to try to dig into factual data and present. And what they found out, most of them, and a lot of them end up leaning on it. Look, Mr. Salandi, this thing might be trending towards hurting our lives. Cyberbullying, suicides, right? Since then to now, can we measure the impact, the social and destructive impact versus the social and positive impact to come to a conclusion? And the only reason I'm asking all this is because Moore's law, what you talked about, Paul, was in the past. It's more than doubling. We are in an exponential phase of the technology implementation. As we blink, there's a new thing to adopt and the bombardment. And then when we put AI in the room, Tiffany, which you raised, ChatGPT, let's go into that. As an educator, when we were growing up, you could not even do math with a calculator, right? You have to work it out. Now, the argument is, but Mr. Salandi, why do we need to continue to use our mind when we have a tool that can help us think? It's easier. But once we start tending to something to think for us, what's the impact on our critical thinking skills? So I'm gonna go to you and ChatGPT, you brought it up, and there are others. That's the one that got the most branding, the most funding. But let's go down to the elementary school, Tiffany, for a second, and the educational system and these kids' development. What's that gonna do for the future of education?
Okay, so thinking through this, I will pick a side. I will pick the fact that I believe that if I had to choose, I would say it's more harming us. And I think that's due to the educational system state right now. I taught through COVID. So when the pandemic hit, everybody was forced to go online super quickly. And what that did for a lot of the older teachers, I was a teacher at the time, and also my mother was a teacher at the time, and she could use a computer, but she was no guru at it. So she really struggled through that. And I watched her struggle through having to put assignments on the computer. I believe that when I was growing up, it was fed to us in a way that allowed us to learn it at the time that was appropriate with understanding the dangers of, cybersecurity. And once you put something on the internet, everything is out there for good. And I think that throughout time, a lot of that has been lost. If you look at social media, how it started now and how it is now, people are sharing the entirety of their lives. And I believe that basically the educational system, there are teachers who have been in the game for a long time, and now they're kind of necessarily stuck in there because they're just trying to get their pension and their retirement out of that, and they haven't cared to learn the new things. And so it's frustrating because these kids have all this new technology in their hands, but no one's teaching them how to use it. They know that they can go on their phone and hit Instagram or Snapchat, and that's as far as the extent of their knowledge goes. And the big part about the Android versus iPhone argument, when people are always like having an Android and like, oh, your team iPhone, like that's so simple. They're right, it is. Android is means above beyond an iPhone, but people don't use Androids to their full capability. So people don't see the point. iPhones are very simplistic, and that's what people like. I think that the divide is really being caused by the fact that these students and these children don't have anybody to teach them how these pieces of technology really work and what they're capable of, dangers and the good side of it. And I think that that's harming our education system, because then it becomes, okay, well, if I just throw my essay into this AI model, okay, cool. When ChatGPT started to make its rise, teachers were panicking. They're like, well, I can't teach them anything. If you basically know that a kid is using a ChatGPT or some AI to write their essay, learn how to use that as a tool, figure out a way around it. You just have to get smarter and kind of outsmart the kids. Teachers always, they have this method that they've been using for years, and they don't want to change it up. And that's the big part that I think is harming the education system overall, which obviously I think puts me on the side of, I think it's more harmful than helpful. I think it has potential to be helpful. Let's
But now you qualify for next episode. Now you've agreed with me, so I feel good. Not just with Paul, but no, Paul, I think we might be on the same page.
Yeah.
With when we look at what level of technology helping hurting we discussing. So your rebuttal or your comments, Tiffany's comments, looking at education. You're an educator as we speak, Paul. This is live and direct. You are an educator in a university, in a college. What do you think?
It's interesting because all the negatives are always pointed towards health, right? you know, not all, but again, talking generically, around the psychological aspects and the physical aspects and health aspects. But if I was to weigh on one side or the other, I would weigh on the positive side because I am a pretty technologically advanced person. I am someone that's always on the cutting edge learning. I consider myself an ever learning student. So for me, technology has been a great tool. The advances we're seeing right now, I've always been right on the cusp and the abreast of various technologies and use them to my benefit. And that's the point is, you know, I've always used them to my benefit and I'll continue to do so. And that's part of the whole creative process. Again, if we remember, these are things to aid us, not to take over us or to have it do it for us. It is for
Well,
any.
but can I want to make a point and you can continue, but we talking, Tiffany went beyond her ability to use it. She used contrast with her and her mom and that generational gap. But we're talking about, I want to frame it as humanity. Forget Paul's ability to understand how this is a helpful tool for you from a humanity standpoint, from a social standpoint. You open saying we were building communities with it and it's creating isolation. So can you address that though, not just your lens, but how is it impacting us across the world, humanity-wise?
Again, it's interesting because it's a very interesting question, but it comes down to individual people are you a sheep, right? Are you a goat? Are you a wolf? What are you? I mean, it's easy to label and say it's hurting and or helping humanity, but it depends on who the people are and how they embrace that, right? In general, people who don't want to be open-minded, we know we have these tests that show people who are open-minded or closed-minded. If you're programmed and fed information for the past generation, then what do you expect, right? I mean, if we look at people who didn't grow up with the technology and they have a different ideology and mindset completely, and that is going to be one thing versus those who've grown up with technology and have been fed a mindset. We live in a day and age whereby things are based on algorithms, on echo chambers. You know, those are challenges you face too as well, which then hurts or helps the overall equation. But the other part of it is don't forget we live in a very capitalistic world where consumerism and capitalism is at play within the technology. And that's a big part of it. Then there's bias that comes into it. So it's easy to look at the negative side because of these factors of how the technology is being implemented and how it affects people. But again, you know, I would always rather be a positive person to say, look more at the positives, while still recognizing the negatives are existing. But how do you teach people to circumvent the negatives and use the positive of something and embrace change? That's the only way we're going to actually, you know, see our way through some of these things. If we take the negative perspective and worry how much about it's hurting us, we're going to continue to focus on the hurt. I think there has to be some focus on the positivity of what it brings. So the very fact that we talk about, back to your comment, Andy, about community, it has built community. But again, for who and how people to interact with that, well, what's in the nature of that person who's reacting negatively anyways? You know, whether they had this kind of technology or not, would they still kind of be that kind of person? And, you know, not to be too scientific, but I would, you know, gather to guess to say that's who the person is and it'd still be that way. It's just allowing for people to be more isolated, but it's also allowing people to connect and have more community. Like if you look at even just something as simple as chat groups and WhatsApp and Telegram and everything else that's going on, how connected are we now? Whereby before I wouldn't be as connected to family members all over the world. So you talk about isolation, that's one thing, but now I'm connected to members that I may not have talked to or may have talked to once or twice in my whole life. Now I can talk to them weekly. It's just my decision on how I choose to use that tool. And again, it goes back to what you were saying in the training of schooling, of education. How are we using these tools to then affect change in behavior and attitude so that we can see positive effects?
So Paul, I think it's funny. Some people don't really want to connect to family all over the world. That makes it life more complicated. So you're right. It all depends on your value system, right? And how you view it. And I don't think even Tiffany, I don't want to speak for her, she's right here. We're not looking and saying it's negative. We open up with pros and cons. We know it's positive. We wouldn't be doing this podcast without technology.
Yeah.
So that is not the issue about we focusing on the negative. We're focusing on the sleeping monster that we created through the rapid implementation without thinking about consequences. That's what we're discussing here. Because at the end of the day, we can say whatever, oh, it's great, it's great, it's great. The suicides, the kidnapping, the negative, where you're talking about human destruction of human life. For me, we got to look at that. We cannot ignore that and say we're going to just focus on the positive. So for me, with the whole technological argument, the way I look at it is education is going to be impacted. And the brain is like any other muscle. If you don't use it, it's going to stop working. People can't find anywhere without a GPS. Is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? So the more we bring this new AI, by the way, it's an oxymoron, artificial intelligence. Doesn't intelligence mean you have information, it's authentic, it's real, and then we say artificial with it? So even that name is a little confusing to me. We accept it, AI, but it's not artificial intelligence. It's us using our system, our intelligence amplified through another technology that is going to be smarter than us. So now we have to leverage that or lean on that to make decisions for us. That to me is something worth thinking about before we just jump in. Oh, it's going to help us, because for the first time, I think social media turned the corner where the tool that we invented was using us as a tool. And now AI is going to further do that, in my opinion, if we don't think about what we're creating. And that's what this discussion is all about. Technology is good. We need our phone. We need all the stuff that we're doing here, even invest in everything. And I think, Tiffany, I love how you put it, is really what you're going to use it for. So our discussion on why we asking if it's helping or hurting today is, for me, Paul, the danger for me is, I talked about when we started, when I was a little kid in school, we didn't have phones. We didn't have a lot of these screens, as Tiffany put it. We didn't even have television. All these things came in while we were growing, right? Now, these little kids, they're being born with all of it. And is that bombardment going to create a society of thinkers or people who can be manipulated by those who are controlling the capitalistic system? I don't know. That's why we're talking about it. I don't have the answer because it's a serious topic, but it's one worth addressing, I think, and really have an intelligent conversation. The last thing I'll say is, you go to the dinner table, Paul, you're with your wife, you're with your kids, and nobody's talking. Everybody's on their phone. That's irritating, right? What happened to the good old days where we can sit down and really, you want to talk about building community? If it's taken away that, where are we going with it? Is my thing, right? Because that's what we had. And now we brought technology to enhance what we have, but it seems like it's pulling us away from even basic communication. And that's kind of the things I think we are addressing today, right? Is that good? Is that bad? How do we fix that? Tiffany.
I think that when you start to get into the whole dinner table conversation, now you're getting into parenting, because I, as a parent, like, I have a phone. So if I'm always on my phone when my kids are trying to talk to me, and then my kids grow up and they're 13, 15 years old, and now I want to talk to you, it's a little bit too late now. I have not set that precedent for them to understand how to actually have real human connection. Really and truly, I think the big part of this is the precedent for these kids is what's so important. And we're missing that really crucial gap for them to learn. No one talks about how serious it is not to put your information out there anymore. People will go out in front of their house, and there have been videos where people can literally find out where you live just based off of putting a few little things from a video together, and they can find out exactly where your house is. And it's that simple. People, I don't think, talk enough anymore about the dangers that are out there with this online persona that people create. There's also the part of, for a very simple example, I grew up with something called Ask Jeeves. I didn't grow up with Google. So like, it didn't have this huge database of information. So if you really wanted to know something, the question that you would have to type into that search bar would have to be very, very specific. I was teaching middle school, and they had to write up a paper, and the things that these kids would put into Google, they don't even know how to Google. They would click on the first thing, which is usually something sponsored now. And that simple of like how to ask a question. That's a lost art form. But I think what it is going to do, like many of these things in certain generations, is it's going to create a divide. You're going to have kids that really, are quote unquote set apart. They're going to lean into what this technology can be used for. I think when it is used as a tool, that's the important part. It's a skill that needs to be taught. It's a tool. It's something that aids yourself in whatever you are using it for. Most jobs that you're going to get now are going to require some form of technology. Even if you're in a trade, I bet that the receipt that you have the person sign off on is probably on an iPad now. So there's some part that needs to, I guess, catch everybody up to speed to a degree. But then I think the push for the dangers that are out there, and that, like I said, that's a lost art. Kids, I don't think understand that anymore, and that's really scary. But it's also on the parents. It's also on the generation before, and that generation before is the ones that's trying to fight it. But you need to learn how to teach them how to use it, because when you start to say, "Oh, don't look at that," they start to get curious, and that's when those dangers start to happen. Teach them, guide them, create a discipline around it. So
Wow, Tiffany, before I get Paul back on, you called me out there because while I was talking about this whole dinner table parenting, as a businessman, the cell phone is always with me. So I know my kids, when they see this, go say, look at that. What are you talking about? You're the one who always had your phone there because it's an important call. So now when you're telling us why we all texting, well, you said it. It's a very powerful point, right? Because kids don't really do what you say, they do what you do. This yeah,
right.
they follow through. Action speaks louder than words. But
Mhm.
but Paul, we in the information age, sometimes called the digital age, right, Paul? So at the end of the day, I think what you are saying, Paul, as a man who understands it's here, the only thing that's constant is change. We're gonna have to live with it. We're gonna have to learn to use it. She just said lean into it, understand how to make it the tool that it needs to be and not let it use you. But we're in the information age, Paul, but we transitioning, right? Do you guys know what the next age is going to be called that they say we're going to go into? Do you know the tag already that's out there?
I'm
No.
curious though.
Experience age, right? We're
Mhm.
going from the information age to the experience age. So I want to enter into our conversation, the virtual reality world, AR and VR, and the fact that, hey, we only have one life to live. Tomorrow is not promised. I want to go to Dubai. I don't have the money. I'm going to do it in the virtual world. This thing is taking up steam like nothing else. The metaverse, call it what you want. People are living there. They're plugged in. We see in movies, by the way, which forecast what's going to come. And there's a lot of these virtual reality movies and headsets and stuff, Paul. So information age, I don't know where we are in terms of the transition, Paul, but if you look it up, the experience age is already tagged and waiting with this virtual reality, this metaverse. I think the big boy in the room, Facebook, the pivot, they call themselves Meta. That's a clue too. Where's this going? What do you think of that? This virtual reality kind of technology now to kind of live out your actual life in the virtual world.
Interestingly enough, again, I still think comes back to you as an individual and how you perceive and accept things. And although there are definitely systems moving you along into that paradigm, not to get too spiritual, but it's up to you to decide what kind of person you're going to be, right? I've always been one, like I said before, who's embraced these things, but from the perspective of understanding the negatives. Because I think if you want to function in today, but also in tomorrow's world, you have to at least understand it. So this idea of a VR experience type of world, we've given ourselves over to our own lust and the desires of our hearts, so we continually have this idea of wanting to be able to experience and feel and see everything. But back to your point, is that a good thing? Just because we can do it, should we do it? Right? That's the big question that's being asked right now in AI and technology. So from the point of an experience age, I understand what you're saying in terms of what they're labeling and calling it as. I think though the experience should be human experience, right? We all want to have the experiences because that's how we exist and how we remember things and how we enjoy things. It's through our own experiences. Not so much that, hey, I have a trip going to New York, I'm going to New York. It's the travel and the whole process of the trip itself, the things I experienced along the way. That was my trip to New York, not just getting to the destination, the end result, and that was it. So at the end of the day, I do agree with you that yeah, this next experience age is a big thing, but we do have to question how much of these things being pushed on us. Like you said, Meta has the power of consumerism and capitalism behind them, and the fact that they've been able to amass such a massive audience. And a lot of that is studied from a psychological perspective. They have psychologists on staff that study behavior and they do research as to human behavior and what's happening with these things. So these new virtual worlds are coming. At what pace and what will happen in the future, I don't know. Will there be a backlash against it? Who knows? But I do think that you're right. We're starting to see that this experience age is what people want. They want to experience different things from the comfort of their own home, not having to leave or go anywhere. That's, I think, only a sect of the population. There are those who still out there who clamor real experiences, who want to do real travel, want to meet real people. One of the things that I do for all my classes is talk about human connection and interaction. If you want to know about being multicultural, understand this world, all it takes is for you to communicate with somebody next to you. I have the privilege of, in my classes, I do as a little test, and we have a fun game every semester. Guess how many different countries are in the room. And often they guess like 5 or 10, and I'm seeing 15 different countries represented every single semester, 15 and up, sometimes 20. So if you want to learn about Nepal, Bangladesh, Pakistan, somewhere else in the world, if you want to understand what it means to be someone else's opinion as we move into this experienced age, you just have to have real world experiences with the person next to you. You have to be able to communicate. But back to your point, what you were saying, Tiff, and also Andy, how can you have those experiences when everybody's on a phone and their face is buried in the screen? I was the same thing too, because a lot of times our excuse is business, and we got caught with that. My wife used to get upset at me all the time, so she made it a rule that anytime we go out, I'm not allowed to have the phone. Like the phone it doesn't matter who it is, what business is going on, once I'm sitting down with her. But it's funny because at night now, when we're ready to go to bed and stuff, what does she do? That's her thing. She sits down and she's on the phone. I'm trying to get her attention in terms of just wrapping the day or before we go to bed at night. And she's,
That
somebody's
sounds
got her
like a
back
different
to me.
conversation you're coming up
Yeah,
with there, Paul, huh? It's
exactly.
about
That's
technology now.
that's
It's about
technology, right?
vital issues. I mean,
But
what
that's
are
what I'm
we?
saying. But it's not just me. You can look all over the internet. And you see tons of people discussing and seeing that the people are so wrapped in this technology. At bedtime, in the morning time, at dinner time. So that's what I'm discussing. Just how we interact. So the point is that I heard her, she heard me. So now we both reduced that amount of time, and we try to increase purposefully. That's the point. Now back to Tiff's point, you have to be purposeful and driven about your intentions and your actions, right? And if you're purposeful about that, in terms of technology use and education around technology, then we will see the positives come out of it. And you're absolutely right. But if you don't embrace it, if teachers don't embrace it, if an industry doesn't embrace it, give you a quick example. When these things first came out, our school was quick to ban these things, right? No use, not allowed to use it. But you can't stop it. So you saying no using it, stop using it, no one's going to use it, and not learn about it and employ what the best practices are and understand standards for it, I think you're better off to be on that cutting edge, or at least on top of the wave, understanding what's coming, so you can find ways of implementing it back to society for a positive, productive outcome.
It's interesting. We always say you can't stop it, but I think for me, it really, you've been saying it, Paul. I won't bring it home for me. It comes down to what impact we want to make with what we discuss in here, right, guys? Because at the end of the day, you can't control other people, it can control you. And I think the ripple effect of you making a stand could have an influence on the person next to you and next to you. So instead of saying we can't stop it, what are we doing about that conversation? Are we just ignoring it, or are we really having, like we're doing here on Tie-Dye Talks, a conversation about it, right? We understand, we know there's the pros and cons with everything in this life. But our life journey, you touch on some things that comes down to your value. I over the time of discovering what wealth is, for me, it comes down to time. Every one of us are born with that same amount, 24 hours in the day, right? Every day we all have the same amount of time, but we don't allocate it the same way, because once you go into having to make a living, there are those who figured out how to leverage that time from other people, have the time, have the freedom, have the financial things to enjoy this journey called life. And then there are those who are just busy trying to make a living. When a new adoption comes out, the masses, if you're not thinking all the time, might just be following because it's, everybody's doing it, so I'm doing it too, because there's a comfort in going with everybody else as opposed to standing alone. But as we sit in 2024 and we discuss this technology, and there's more as we speak that probably was launched today and tomorrow and so forth, I tend to look at the young generation coming up, kind of like I'm impressed with Tiffany not being in our demographic, but looking at that divide, right, Tiffany, and how it's impacted your generation and your friends and then your kids and our grandkids. And that's what we have to look at, Paul. I remember when I turned 50, or one of our friends who turned 50 said, look, I'm going to swing for the fences now because I have less time now than the first 50 years, right? I'm not sure I'm going to live another 50. So this thing called time is so precious. How are we using it every day? Technology does help you reach out and stay connected to family all over the world. But again, the daily connections, the daily family interactions, the daily student social interactions. What is that getting better, worse, and how can we address it without just saying, well, it's going to happen, we can't stop it? What do we do there, Tiffany? How do we, does it start with conversations like these, which I know is going on elsewhere? Everybody's kind of podcasting and we're using these platforms to have a voice. And again, people are doing whatever. Some people are just trying to get their followers so they can monetize. But how do we address this, Tiffany, in your opinion?
I think a big part of it is to check your expectations, because I believe that the need for connection, all humans have that. What does that connection look like for you though? Because I find that a lot of people will log on to their social medias, and because it's called social media, oh, I'm being social. But a lot of people are passive users when it comes to social media. You're just scrolling. So are you actually making connections? How often are you messaging these people and having a full-on conversation with these people? I think that setting your expectations around it, and also setting them and then checking in with them regularly. When you start, it may need to be daily, and then you could back it off to weekly and then monthly when you actually start to get a little bit more comfortable in yourself. Make it a point to meet up with somebody in person. Start to do those things to really curate your expectations around how to actually connect with people, because I think that's one of the biggest things of technology. It allows for connection. In what way? It could be business, it could be friends, whatever you really want to use it for. But I think the sole part of it is connection.
Yeah, that's so because we are a tie-dye group, right? Think it, do it. I love the fact that you gave a solution to the problem there, the expectations, setting the expectations, and how then do you lean into the technology and create that social interaction, which it's saying it is. So Paul, as we look to kind of wind down the second half of this talk today, so we addressed, people gonna be on either side. We know that that's just the life. We all different. But can you think of some power as a man who's always positive and knowing how to use this and making it the tool that we've invented it to be? What are some of the um, positive things that people can do, you think, to continue to stay ahead of this rapid fire technology that's being implemented, maybe on a daily basis now? I don't even know the rate, but we can look that up. But what are some of the positives you think solutions, or let's call it that, we can share?
I think that goes back to your own personal education, having an open mind to want to understand and learn about some of these changes as they come, right? If you remain open and positive and understanding, but also with the ideology, the mentality of how can you adjust to this and how does it adjust to you, right? Some people are very close-minded, and when you're close-minded and not having an open mindset, then you're not going to embrace these things, and you're going to find it challenging. It's always challenging though, because anytime learning something, you don't understand also, Andy, from a biological perspective, growth requires destruction in a sense, destructing old cells, tearing, ripping, breaking, and then forging new bonds, healing and growing. So understanding growth and having a growth mindset is not being stuck in where you are or were, but being open and positive to know that you, at some point in time, you have to open up and understand. Now, that said, it doesn't mean you compromise your beliefs or your morals or your understanding of why things are the way they are. It's really important for us to have our own spiritual and moral lens around these things, because we can then let technology rule us. And that's where we're seeing the problems right now. Back to so many of the health concerns, which is always tied to health for children, is because, even relaying back to your earlier comment, what's it doing to kids when we let kids sit in front of a computer or in front of a screen, and how is that affecting the relationship for family, and then what's happening to their cognitive development and their growth, right? These are some things, and they're tough questions we don't know the answers to even yet. But we do know that overall, most of the studies are showing negative effects. So it's a different day and age, even for parents or even grandparents or great grandparents now, to understand what's happening to the next generation. But I think with the lived experiences that people have, and being able to share best practices and be able to reflect on wisdom, that human wisdom and that human interaction and understanding and that spirituality should be a guiding light towards what's needed, so that this way we don't fall astray into these things, because nothing's really new under the sun. We've had these things in some form or way or shape before that have kind of done the same things, but as you're indicating, Andy, it's just exponential right now. So it's happening so fast. Can people even react or adjust to it without being able to see the end result of the consequences? So those are questions that I haven't really necessarily answered, but I firmly believe that my answer to that is, your firm belief in your spirituality, your faith, tied in with an open acceptance to understanding, at least, and being open to education, will help you navigate and then be in the right place and space.
Well, I think you did answer it. A growth mindset versus a fixed mindset is the beginning of what you're saying, so that you can embrace and learn and understand, like think through how it can help you and not let it use you as a tool. So that growth mindset is a nice solution to the problem, where don't keep a closed mind, because it's around us, it's happening. And if you have a growth mindset and you're always willing to learn and understand how to use a new technology, it might be, as you said, a little painful to get up to the learning curve, but it requires you to think, it requires you to really put some thinking in it. And so that's a solution. And then when you look at the spiritual, foundation of what you want to run your life on, the value system, the morals, that's another way of coping and making sure, maybe again, from the family unit, the parenting that Tiffany talked about, you instill certain principles and guidelines within the family structure to cope as well, so that we're not pulled apart and nobody's really connected anymore, which is what the goal is. I remember I didn't get to address the AR VR from my perspective. It's interesting what's happening. I do think, from the positive, my wife loved to travel. I think they invented AR or VR for my wife, because she's always, I was like, what are you doing? I'm traveling. She's a travel agent, but she's always online in different places, just enjoying looking at places, culture. When she watch movies, she always talk about, we need to go there. So I really think a lot of people are using that world to experience things that they can't afford to right now. They're thinking, I may not get to. I want to go to Dubai, but man, I've been waiting to do it for 10 years. So I'm just going to plug into this virtual world and I'll be there. So a lot of this is driving not just maybe the vanity of humanity to have things, but just maybe the experience of travel. I'm going to look at it from that perspective. But it is also something that is growing. And I know folks who have their multiple metaverse, they have their avatar. And here's what I was told. I'm not doing that, but I was told you literally kind of have an outer body experience in the metaverse, where it seems like your physical body leaves you and enters into this virtual avatar, this alter ego that you've created in the metaverse. And Tiffany, like you say, so the people who are shy, they're in the metaverse and they have very different character now. They get to live out, I'm not shy here, I have on this mask, I'm dressed up, and I can experience more, because in my real life, I'm a very introverted person. I don't have a lot of friends. I'm socially awkward, whatever you want to say. So again, is that a good thing? Maybe it's helping people sort of experience life that they may not experience in the physical. And so this driving force for the metaverse is very powerful. But going back to maybe the education piece, what is it doing there as well? What's going on with this whole learning process as we continue to adopt technology and the speed at which the adoption is taking place? So I'll pass it to you, Tiffany, in terms of we kind of going around the horn to close this amazing topic, pros, cons, solutions, just how do we lean into this? It's here. We have to know that it's good, because we wouldn't have had this tie-dye talks without Zoom, without internet, so we know we need it. But yeah, your closing thoughts, Tiffany, on how we can navigate this thing called technology that's a rapid fire coming at us.
Yeah, I would say circle back around to the expectations, set proper expectations around it, challenge yourself as well. I am someone who, I have certain parts that I'm not going to explore. Like, I don't have TikTok. I'm not going in that world. that's my limit there. I understand the use of it. I understand what it's about. It's not for me though, and that's okay. I think that certain people definitely set your expectations around what you want to use technology for and figure out how it can work for you. Make it work for you rather than being worked by it. Um, Understand that in the schools, we're in a system too. I think that part of it is that the understanding of how school was, years back, it can't keep being that way. Things have to change with the times. And I think that school needs to kind of catch up, the education system needs to catch up with where we are in the advancements that we're making. Taking computers and just shoving them in front of a bunch of kids and saying, here, that's not helping. You're not teaching them how it is. Yeah, set the expectations around it and lean into understanding what it is that you're actually using. I think that part has really gotten lost throughout the years. Understanding what it's about, what it can do, the dangers of it, how it can actually be a tool, and how you can basically build a skill around it.
Tiffany, before I let you go off the hot seat, so to speak, you know TikTok is now, how did you assess it? Like how, before using a new social media tool technology, like a TikTok, how are you aware it's not for you? Did you like is there something giving you a little snapshot, synopsis of this new social media or what? How did you know it's not for you?
For me, one, I don't follow trends a lot. I am very wary when everybody just jumps onto something and it's this hot new thing. I think that one, me being able to access TikToks through other social media was also like, well, I don't really need to download it. And I think it was also understanding that if I already have Facebook and Instagram, adding TikTok, like what value does that bring to my life? Within having that, what am I going to use it for? Am I going to post on there, or am I just going to be a passive user on there? And I felt that I would be more passive. I wouldn't really post. Like I said, I grew up in that age where like we talked about understanding that once you put something on the internet, it's out there forever. And so that kind of, getting chained up into that whole TikTok world was like, that's not really for me. Go y'all, but it's not for me. So that was kind of my criteria around it.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, Paul, Tiffany made a point that as we come around, what's the purpose of education anyway? Is it to prepare us to have knowledge to cope with the world, or is it to prepare us to have the certifications to have a job? And if that's based on those two things, information age / digital age, the jobs are morphing into different form from the traditional sense. In other words, was the education system kind of a real conduit to the industrial revolution, the industrial age, and now we're in a new age. And to Tiffany's point, the system is not catching up to the new age and the preparation necessary through what we call education for this new age.
Exactly. You just said it there, right? If we understand education and training, they both work hand in hand, but they're different definitions and they mean different things. Education from the word educe, meaning to bring out, to take out of somebody. So the whole idea is to bring out of you your knowledge, your understanding, your learning for you to grow. Training, I'm putting into you. Repetition, we see it in sports. I want to repeat a process of something of doing it so that when you do it, there's muscle memory and you understand how to do it. You can do it quite readily and quickly and easily. But the difference here really is education as a system, specifically in North America and in the Western world, we know was, as you said, set up with specific means. And, I've said this over many years, even in my training, most of the jobs you're being trained for and most of the education you go to school for, you'll probably never do. Like, you're no longer a biologist. I'm no longer a chemist. That's what we went to school for, right? Not many people go to school and come out and only work or end up in the discipline of the job that they're in, right? So at the end of the day, technology and you're using technology and education is to help you learn so that you can be a continual learner and they continue to adapt and adjust. I mean, if we go back to even long before this, just human nature in the caveman days, whatever you want to look at that, survival of human beings had to adapt and learn how to survive and use tools, even as technology. How do I create this knife, this fork? How do I create this thing to put, clothing on my back or feed myself or put a roof over my head or whatever have you? So back to those just simple means and bringing it back to today's and making it simple again is how do we use these things to make your life better? Now, you don't have to worry about these things, food, clothing, shelter, because for most of us anyways, because in theoretically a civilized world, a lot of those things are provided for us. Although we do have large swaths of the population who don't have those things provided for them. The question is, how can we use these tools not only from that perspective, but back to your point, Andy, to make humanity better? How can we help our fellow human beings, and how can we learn to be, much more human by using these tools? I think the human aspect, spiritual aspect, the aspect of understanding one's own psyche and personality is lost on technology. So we can do these great things, but back to my comment again, because we can, should we? That's the philosophical question that's happening right now, even inside of AI. The whole kerfuffle that happened, not to go too far afield and dive into that, but with this AGI, artificial general intelligence, and them firing Sam Altman, the head of OpenAI, and then bringing him back and all that stuff. You hear rumors, who knows what's true or not, but it's all around this, centered around this discussion of, what artificial intelligence is going to be, and agreeing what it should be. Is it an open source where it's shared with all humanity? Is it paid? Like, look at it, internet was supposed to be free and for all. It's not. You got to pay monthly. So capitalization and capitalism and consumerism has become a part of it, right? The same thing with new technology tools. They're supposed to be accessible and for all and free, and that's the general human concept, but it's not how it ends up being, unfortunately, right? So in the end, I think overall, just a synopsis, I think it's really important that we really start to look at these areas in a much deeper understanding for ourselves, and try to understand how to navigate.
Well, we've come to the end of episode 2, and I don't think this is a finished conversation. We'll circle back. I do think having Tiffany here was very, very good. Tiffany, thanks for your perspective and sort of bridging the gap, and also making Paul and I look good in episode 2, brightening up the room. But I really think Tie-Dye Talks, our goal, Paul, as we've said, is to just have the conversations we were having since we've met, by doing it publicly now, because maybe there are folks struggling with these conversations themselves, looking for solutions. The whole anatomy of think it, do it is hope and faith. So our talks are going to be surrounding those themes. As life lessons is the major overarching theme, and within the life lesson, episode 2 was technology, and is it really helping or hurting our lives? And I think what I can say, that as a consensus here, even though we all have our own opinions, and we've not talked about this prior to today, you can see there's a certain alignment among the three of us that we do need to check it. We do need to investigate it. We do need to set expectations about it. We do need to have a growth mindset to lean into it and understand how to continue to keep it being a tool, instead of us becoming the tool and us being a pawn in the system of who really is rapidly bringing this to market for capital gain. Is it to get us better, or is it, hey, I am making this because I'm going to make some money with it? The consequences, let the chips fall where it may. So that's where I think we have the responsibility to say, like you say, Tiffany, is it for me or is it not for me? Ask those questions going forward. I think that's the simplest solution we can give today on such a very controversial topic, because again, we're not trying to say there's no positives at all. Or not, our whole thing is we need it. And not only do we need it, here it comes. It's in the room and it's coming fast and furious. So any closing thoughts, Tiffany, Paul, before we end episode 2? I got to tell you guys again, I'm looking forward to continuing the Tie-Dye Talks, because this episode, when we sharing, we also learning, and I think I've learned a lot. I learned that I'm not going to be having my phone at all at dinner table, so I then can at least tell my grandkids don't do it, because my kids, I might have lost that battle already for my example of carrying my phone and having business while having dinner. Closing thoughts, Tiffany.
I will touch on the fact that I don't think you're lost with your kids. I think you just got to outsmart them, in the sense that use the phone as a topic of discussion. Then, if that's the case, if you want to have your phone, then you kind of just got to work it into the conversation somehow.
Great solution there.
But yeah, really, I think that the biggest thing is that you're in control, and understand that, make technology a positive thing for you. I think it is the user, because it's still the user experience. You get to make it positive or negative. It's really all in your hands, no pun intended.
So Paul, Martin, Tie-Dye Talks, episode 2. I didn't see the normal high energy. That means you have 20 projects. You might have, your semester may have started. I know you're a man of multiple hats. And, your closing thoughts, Paul, on this beautiful episode.
No, just the high energy is more, or less energy is just more allowing us all to kind of coexist in the room. We brought a new person in, we'll learn the personalities and whatnot. I'll leave you with a quick little story, and then also words, not my words, my wife's words that she's been saying to me for a long time, because, I guess us husbands gotta listen to our wives. My daughter gets mad at me because I'll still yell downstairs, or I'll still tell her to come do this or do that. My daughter is, late 20s now, hitting her 30s, so she's from definitely that new smack dab of that generation. And she always tells me, just text me. Why do you call me for? Why do you come downstairs? Why do you yell at me? Just text me. So I'm not texting you. I'm not going to text you. We can talk. Come talk. When you want to see me, come and talk to me. Just put in a text. Nope. Because we live in the same house. You're downstairs. Come upstairs and talk to me. It annoys her. I know I annoy the heck out of her, but it's okay because I'm living, and I blame my wife. When she just laughs, my wife laughs. I blame her. I said, here's the line. More is caught than taught. That's it. So that's what I'm doing. I'm living it and I'm teaching it, and more is caught than taught.
Wow. Profound. Well, thank you guys so much for episode 2. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I look forward to episode 3. And Tiffany, you're on the team whenever you want to pay a visit to Tie-Dye Talks. You are more than welcome. You've earned your stripes. And I think you've taught us some things here with that. We can't just attack your generation anymore. I think you did a good job of representing them and making sure we don't say they're all like that. Everyone's like that. There's some folks like yourself who are still holding on to those old school values. That was, for me, refreshing to see and hear. Okay. All right.
All right. We'll see you next time, everybody. Tie-Dye Talks, same channel, same station. Wherever you saw this, you'll see it again. Stay tuned. More information coming, and hopefully you'll see us on more platforms, more places, more spaces. All right. See you next time.
Take care.